Houses, condos or land? Buy, rent or sell? Should we invest now or in the future? The Mix 88.5 Property Update.
Hello and welcome to the Property Update here on Mix 88.5, and I'm joined in the studio today by Tim Gladwin from Salmons. So let's get started.
The Mix 88.5 Property Update.
Welcome to the Property Update. I'm Mark Rogers, and I'm joined, as usual, by Tim Gladwin from Salmons. We'll be looking at exchange rates, got a couple of special properties to go through, and the general market here in Pattaya. So, good afternoon, Tim. How the devil are you?
Very well, thank you, Mark. And yourself?
Not bad, not bad. It's filling in for Russell today. It's a nice little change, isn't it? A change is as good as a rest.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like I did say earlier about... third time lucky. Yeah, this is my third one that I'm doing, but that is, of course, why I failed as being a heart surgeon. So, Tim, what have you got lined up for us today, then?
Yeah, just a basic review of the last week in the market. Last week, one of the things that we reported was that it had been a little bit quiet, and suggested that perhaps that might have something to do with the very heavy rains that we had during the previous week. And obviously, what is normally at this time of the year, the onset of the Pattaya rainy season, which, as we said last week,
I think we've had that.
Yeah, it tends to be a bit shorter than the rest of Thailand, but when it's here, it tends to be quite severe. After predicting the start of it, and perhaps for good reason, given the amount of rain we did, of course, have, it now seems to have dried up. And so everything we said last week has been disproved.
That's the thing with live radio, isn't it? You know?
Yes, indeed. And obviously, the amount of rain we were having, it did seem that we had hit that rainy season that typically comes around this time of the year. But of course, the last week's been really quite nice. Decent temperatures, not a great deal of rain, which is probably a good job, because it took a little while for some of the roads around Jomtien and a few of the other places to dry up. Certainly, I was still driving through quite significant water on the way home, I think right up until the Thursday after the flooding on the Sunday. So, there was a lot of water, and it took a long time for it to clear away in certain areas. But after that tough week and a relatively quiet week that followed it, this last week has, for some reason, and I'm starting to give up predicting exactly what's going to happen and why, but it's been much busier, and the level of inquiries that we've had this week, bearing in mind our monthly e-newsletter, which tends to elicit a lot of responses and a lot of inquiries, has not yet gone out this month. But the last week we've had a very high level of independent and genuine inquiries from apparently genuine buyers. Very encouraging, and probably at a higher level, independent of the e-newsletter, than we've had for probably 2 or 3 months.
Right, okay, because I must admit, if I was in the market for buying and all those floods were around, I would have got hold of a 4x4 and gone to look at all the properties that I'd be thinking of purchasing or living in to see where it floods.
Well, absolutely right, and that's one of the things Russell and I discussed last week. It's a very important consideration here in Pattaya, where, of course, when it rains, it can rain very, very hard indeed, and for an extended period, as we saw a week last Sunday. And obviously, there are a number of areas around town that are very susceptible to flooding. Now, obviously, if you're 7 or 8 stories up in a condo, that's not really an issue, although walking out your front door might not be a lot of fun if it's flooded. But nevertheless, if you're buying a house, and particularly a bungalow,
because then you've got nowhere to hide.
Yeah, it's really not ideal. As I mentioned just before we went on air, when I was looking at the Pattaya Mail downstairs, some of the shots of Sukhumvit Road early on that Sunday morning are quite incredible. I've never seen anything like it. There's a car poking through, which is just about poking through, someone walking waist deep in water. But apart from that, it looks, for all the world, like a large lake between 2 rows of shop houses.
Well, it certainly does. And Paul Strachan at PMTV, he actually said they ought to do a caption competition for it, and he kicked it off with, "You should see my pool."
Yes, indeed. I'll move to Pattaya, every house next to a waterfront.
That's right, yeah, which is nice, isn't it?
Well, floodwater probably not quite as nice as that you might imagine with that kind of logo, but nevertheless, it was shocking. But like I say, bizarrely, given the time of year, when you might have anticipated that was the start of the rainy season, what we have next, we've had really a very nice week or so, and very little rain at all. And so, like I say, my prediction that was the start of the rainy season appears to have been rather misguided.
Well, we shall see, won't we? We'll touch a bit of wood there and hope that it doesn't start again and we have it all over again. Right, so the different sectors of the market.
Yeah, well, certainly, you know, one of the things that the last week and the high level of inquiries has done, perhaps inevitably, it makes you think about the high season. Obviously, we're not a million miles away from the high season now. Traditionally, most people seem to believe that the end of October, the start of November, is the so-called high season, although obviously things then tend to pick up and get busier as we get closer to the traditional Christmas, New Year holiday period, and obviously after New Year we have some very nice weather up until March, perhaps the beginning of April here, which again tends to attract an awful lot of visitors from overseas. But nevertheless, obviously, where are we now? We're towards the end of September, around little more than a month away perhaps from the start of the so-called high season, and therefore your mind does start turning, particularly when you get more inquiries as to what this high season will bring. Will it be significantly better than it was last year? Will it be worse as a result of the continued economic problems overseas? Personally, I think, you know, we look back, 2008 was obviously very tough with the start of the so-called credit crunch, the global economic crisis kicking off, and there was an awful lot of uncertainty around, and predominantly for that reason, there was obviously a great deal of uncertainty in the property market, and things were very tough. 2009 wasn't fantastic, but it was a marked improvement from the previous year. Then last year, again, it was definitely an improvement from 2009. But nothing like it was in the days of the real estate boom here 4, 5, 6 years ago. I think this year there are plenty of reasons to believe that the likelihood is we will again see somewhat of an improvement. I don't think we're yet in a position where we can expect things to start going crazy or booming, but I think we'll see a steady increase. As we've said in recent weeks and months, one sector of the market in particular has been doing very, very well, namely the small studio and one-bedroom condos in new developments that tourists, visitors, and even locals can buy off-plan. They can buy themselves maybe a 35 square metre one-bedroom condo in a very nice new development, typically for somewhere in the region of 1.3 to 2 million baht. And these properties, particularly bearing in mind, of course, that as they are being bought off-plan, that they come with payment terms. You don't pay everything up front. You're paying gradually with a deposit, payments during the construction period, and typically a final payment on the key being handed over, although also some of the companies are offering finance that runs for longer than that. So these are quite attractive products because obviously they don't cost very much money, so you're not having foreigners bring an awful lot of money into Thailand, thus the risk that they are taking is perceived by them to be limited. It's a product that lends itself quite well to Pattaya because you've got a lot of people coming here to stay, whether it's for 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, and small units in a resort style development is the kind of rental property that you would consider would be suitable for an awful lot of visitors. And this has obviously attracted a lot of investors, and these units generally have been doing very, very well. Companies like Matrix, Iguana, Heights Holdings, and one or two others have been reporting very, very strong sales, doing very, very well. Other sectors of the market, secondary market sales, bigger, more expensive condos, houses, they've not been doing quite so well. The market's certainly not been dead, but nevertheless, it's been a lot tougher.
There's been a hesitation in the market.
Absolutely. And I think it's still the case that there are limited numbers of investors who, whether it's because of the way the economy is performing in their home countries, or whether it is the exchange rates, which they perceive still to be against them, in that the baht, relative to what it was a few years ago, is very strong. Whether or not that's going to change is obviously another matter, but nevertheless it's perceived to be strong, and therefore people don't necessarily want to bring an awful lot of money in.
Well, it's unlikely to change massively. I mean, even a 10% change would only, say, take the pound up to about, what, 54 or something. Are we going to get back to, what was it, a few years ago?
It was
70, 70?
68, 70 for a reasonably long time. But actually, that was, as we've discussed previously, on the back of the Asian financial crisis. Before the Asian financial crisis, it was traditionally worth about 40 baht to the pound and 25 baht to the dollar. We're not even down to that yet.
Yeah.
So I think, if you're a betting man, the likelihood is that it might even get a bit stronger. The likelihood of it going back to 68, 70, well, it's not very likely at all.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, when you've got in your memory that you used to get 68 or 70 baht to the pound, it's very, very hard then to get used to a situation where you're getting an awful lot less. And that obviously has caused a lot of people to refrain from bringing a lot of money into Thailand, particularly given the overall global economic environment where you have people who are nervous. They may have money in the bank, but in times of economic strife, even with people with money in the bank, they tend to like to play safe. They like to keep that money in the bank. They don't like to throw it around. What they might consider luxury investments, speculative investments, tend not to be quite so popular with them. And therefore, the luxury property here hasn't obviously sold anywhere near as well as it did sell a few years ago. As to whether it will return, and generally what's going to happen to the market, I think there are, nevertheless, lots of reasons to be very positive. 2010 was a tough year for Thailand. We all know it was. Violent demonstrations that went on the TV around the world. But nevertheless, and perhaps somewhat surprisingly, tourist arrivals in Thailand through 2010 were up, I think, 13% on the previous year. In 2011, the predictions and the early figures appear to suggest that there will be a similar increase this year.
Yeah.
Those are massive, massive increases, particularly when you bear in mind that the world's going through probably the biggest global economic crisis since perhaps the Great Depression. You also take into account that Thailand has been somewhat less than stable politically, and as we said a minute ago, the location for some very significant violent demonstrations a short time ago. But still, the tourist numbers go up.
Yeah.
Now that indicates to me that Thailand is very, very popular.
Yeah, the underlying trend is it is very popular, and I've just returned from Europe for a little bit, and part of it will be the cost of going on holiday now to Europe is so extraordinarily expensive compared to how it used to be. I mean, that used to be popular, Greece, Spain, because it was cheaper than England. Now, not the case at all. €5 for a bottle of beer.
Yeah.
£4. And so that is part of it as well. So although people worry about the exchange rate here in Thailand, going back and seeing what's happening there, the difference is humongous. It's a huge difference.
Well, I think that's exactly right. You sometimes get long-term expats here who complain that Thailand's getting expensive.
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, well, you really should go home.
The whole world is getting more expensive.
It is. And the important fact is that on a relative scale, Thailand is still exceptionally cheap. It's an awful lot cheaper in many respects than most other countries you could either live in or visit as a tourist. Now, that is important, particularly when it goes along with the fact that Thailand is a very welcoming country. Thailand is, in relative terms, a very safe country. And in fact, I think the violent demonstrations, the fact that those happened, and yet I don't know of any foreigners who felt that they were in any danger whatsoever, is indicative of actually how safe Thailand is. When similar demonstrations have happened in North Africa and other places, all bets are off. If you're a foreigner, you're in great danger. When the Libyan crisis started, the SAS actually were sent in to rescue British citizens, and in fact I think some British citizens were kidnapped, and a lot of them had people generally took advantage of the situation to steal from them, rob them. It was an ugly situation. Here in Thailand, quite the opposite. Significant upheaval in the domestic society was taking place, and yet foreigners generally felt very comfortable and unthreatened.
Yeah. And the thing is, I mean, things are going on around the world. I mean, we will benefit as well from that horrible story that's going on in Kenya, where that lady's been kidnapped, you know, and her husband was killed. Egypt, of course, from last year and what's going on there. So it makes it more attractive, more so, to come here, to places like Thailand and even Goa. You know, they're experiencing increase as well because of the turmoil in Africa.
Yeah, well, I think the conclusions that you can fairly draw from two things, namely the number of units that even in this environment Heights Holdings, Matrix, Iguana are selling, and the fact that tourist numbers are up in spite of the global economic crisis and in spite of the political issues that have been happening here for some time. You can draw two basic conclusions. One, people love Thailand and they love coming to Thailand. I think it's very, very clear. And secondly, people who come here, they want to buy property here. Now, they might not be spending the same amount of money as they once were for the reasons we went through a minute ago, but nevertheless, clearly, they still want to have holiday homes here. They want to have, people want to come here and live here. There's no doubt at all that those two things are happening in the market.
Yeah.
And that, like I say, is in spite of all the challenges we have. Therefore, one would anticipate that as and when the challenges we're facing right now start to clear up and disappear, and I'm not saying that's going to happen overnight. I mean, I think clearly the world has some very significant and very deeply ingrained economic issues to get through, and it may take a few years to do so. And while those are going on, even though they're in the West, obviously they have, in a global economy, they have an effect on every country in the world. And that's what we're seeing, because domestically, Thailand's doing absolutely fine. The issues we're facing now, economically, are predominantly from the West.
Yeah.
You know, bizarre as it may sound, the fact that Italy gets downgraded by Standard & Poor has an effect on the Thai Stock Exchange and on the Chinese Stock Exchange and on every stock exchange around the world. That's the nature of the global economy, unfortunately, perhaps. But nevertheless, I think it's fair to point out that through this all, Thailand has done very, very well. Whether it's the tourist numbers you look at, whether it's the amount of foreign direct investment that continues to arrive, something we discussed a few weeks ago with the factories continuing to be built in the Eastern Seaboard industrial estates, whether it's the foreign investors that are investing in the real estate here still in very significant numbers, albeit predominantly in relatively affordable products, the market is still doing pretty well.
Yeah. And also with property, you should never be in it for a quick buck. You have to take the long-term view, and long-term property in Thailand, in Pattaya especially, it's very stable.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? Because the prices are relatively affordable, and they still have a strong connection to the cost of acquiring the land and building the property. And while real estate that you buy has a relatively close connection to the cost to build it, it's got to be well priced. You know, obviously, if you're in London or somewhere like that, where property prices, it's about supply and demand. The cost to build is irrelevant. You know, when you're talking about condos selling for up to £150 million, I dread, you know, how that relates to the cost to build. However nice that condo might be, it might cost you £1 million or £2 million baht to build. But the price at £150 million pounds has nothing to do with that. It's purely a limited supply and a very, very strong demand. Here in Thailand, we don't tend to have that. Some people try to do that when they're pricing, but to a large extent, most prices have their basis still in the cost to build and acquire the land plus a profit margin on top. And therefore, bearing in mind we're in a place where labour is still relatively cheap, where materials are obviously going up in price as they are everywhere, but nevertheless are still quite affordable. You can still build properties for a very reasonable amount of money when you take into account the situation worldwide. And therefore the pricing is also very, very good.
Yeah, I was looking at something this morning, actually, a bit of a surprise to you here. There's a proposal going on in the UK in the political circles of the government where they're going to, I think, increase council rates on empty properties. Okay, which is deliberately targeting like your upper class, your middle class people who have bought a second home either for holiday or for investment. And because it's something like, there's 1.5 million people waiting for homes, and there are about the same number of houses that are empty for more than 6 months a year, they're going to deliberately target them with higher taxes, which is probably a good thing in a market such as the UK where supply is limited and where there are so many people waiting. Now, what that might do, it might end up having a knock-on effect to places like Pattaya, where people take their money out of their second property, say in the UK, where they're getting a little bit of income, and start investing over here.
Well, I'm sure that's right. And I think if you can see the big picture, there's a lot of people who don't appear to have the ability to see the big picture. But if you look at the big picture and you look at the future and you look at the underlying fundamentals of the Pattaya market, then they're very, very strong. Pattaya has it attracts people from a very, very broad range of places. Moreover, as I often say, we are located here pretty much equidistant between India and China. Each of them populations of over 1 billion people, the fastest growing middle classes in the world. Economically, they're performing year on year wonderfully well. The Indians and Chinese are coming here in ever-increasing numbers, and we're now starting to hear that Chinese investors are starting to buy here, particularly bearing in mind that it's now, a law's been passed where I think a Chinese national can only own a maximum of 2 houses in China. A lot of the very wealthy Chinese were buying vast amounts of real estate in China. They're no longer going to be able to do that. So what's happening, as with Chinese business generally, but as with the Chinese corporations, is Chinese individuals are starting to look overseas for investments. I spoke to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me that they did a sales fair for Bulgarian real estate in China, and over the course of the weekend, I think they sold 70 units in Bulgaria. Now, if you can sell Bulgarian units in China, one would anticipate that Thailand would be a far easier sell. It's far more familiar to Chinese. There are lots of Chinese here. It's very close. They know exactly where it is and what they're getting. Chinese generally like coming here. Bulgaria, one would anticipate that to an awful lot of Chinese, that doesn't mean anything. They may have heard of the country, they may have heard of the capital city, but I don't think that many of them will have much idea of what is actually there. So if you can sell that quantity of Bulgarian condos over a weekend, one would think the situation would be far more positive with Thai condos, particularly in Pattaya, which is, like I say, it's a resort with ever-increasing tourist numbers. It's not only that, it's actually a significant city now, a focal point for the industrial estates on the eastern seaboard, and thus a commercial hub as well as a tourist centre, and indeed a retirement centre, where you've got people from all over the world coming here, not for holidays, but actually to live, to settle down, whether those are people of pension age or younger. People are coming here in vast numbers.
And that's always good, actually. Whenever you have retired people in a holiday resort, it gives a stability to the market. When people say here about high season and low season, if you compare it to, say, somewhere like Cyprus, with a very highly developed infrastructure for tourism, the difference between high season and low season there it's huge, 80%. 80% difference. Here, it's about 30%, I'd say, maybe 40%.
I would say perhaps even less. I mean, I can't remember when I last saw Pattaya actually quiet. It's a big functioning city on its own right now. I read the other day that it's got a population, and I don't know where they got the figure from, of nearly 600,000 people. That's a significant city. Most tourist centres tend to be small villages that grow up into tourist towns, and tend to have far bigger transient populations than they do permanent populations. Pattaya now, whether it's in part due to the presence of Lamshabang, Thailand's biggest port just up the road, or the 38 industrial estates that circle Pattaya, it could be any of those reasons, but it's a big city in its own right. It's also, of course, a big resort town, but certainly not exclusively. No. It was a two-dimensional town for many years, but those days are long gone, and it's got at least 3 significant factors that draw people here, whether it's the business, the tourism, or the retirement, or indeed for Thai people coming to live here and work here. It is, I think, that long gone are the days when it's purely a tourist town.
Yeah, definitely. We're coming up, actually, I think be a nice time just to have a quick look at the exchange rates. I believe you have a list there. I'm particularly pleased because I dumped all my euros 3 weeks ago at 43, and now the euro's down to 41.05. Yes, anyway, do you want to take it away? Yeah, let's have a little look and have a little chat.
Certainly. I mean, what appears to be happening is the baht's getting a little bit stronger again against the pound. The pound's now down basically to 47 baht. Last week I think it was 47.65, so obviously quite a significant fall.
Half a baht.
And in line with what we were saying earlier, if anything, the baht's getting stronger, certainly against the pound. Not much change with the US dollar, a little bit weaker, the dollar. The Aussie dollar down about half a cent. And a little bit, the euro, like you say, it's been getting weaker for the last few weeks. It's actually got a little bit weaker again. And I think that's indicative of the problems in Italy
and Greece.
You know, the euro appears to have an awful lot of problems right now.
Big time.
And actually, if you see it, even though the pound is getting weaker as well, the differential between the pound and the euro appears to be greater than it was.
Oh, it is, yeah. So it's up here. It's up about 1.14, whereas about 1.09, 1.11 over the summer period. I dumped my euros actually the day after I arrived here.
Yeah, I mean...
Just changed them straight away.
There are two ways of looking at it. You know, a lot of foreigners might say, well, it's not good. You know, if I want to buy property here or whatever else, I'm going to bring money and I won't get so much money. But if you're established in Thailand, if you're earning in Thailand, if Thailand is now your life, then this should be encouraging, because it's more evidence of the strength of the baht, which obviously has its foundations in the strength of the Thai economy, the increased amount of manufacturing here, both by domestic companies and multinationals. Yeah, it's as much as it reflects poorly on the Western nations, where a lot of us come from, it reflects much better on Thailand, where many of us have made our home. So, you know, there's certainly a positive and a negative way of looking at it.
Yeah, certainly is indeed. And that brings us on, talking about exchange rates and purchasing. You've got two properties, I believe, this week that we're going to have a quick look at.
Yeah, I thought I'd mention two because they're very close by to one another. Both in a very good location on the Pattaya side of Pratamnak Hill. If people aren't massively familiar with that area, as you come out of Pattaya heading towards Jomtien, you can go basically two ways. One up Thap Raya Road, the newly widened 6-lane highway that now joins Pattaya and Jomtien, or alternatively you can go up Pratamnak Hill.
Straight up.
Between those two roads, as you go up the hill, is a very nice area. Obviously, it's very close to Pattaya, very close to Jomtien, very close to the restaurants between Pattaya and Jomtien, and easy to get out onto the new road, and thus up Tepasit Road, up to the supermarkets, up to Sukhumvit Road, and wherever you might want to go from Sukhumvit Road. So it's actually a great location, very convenient, very close to everywhere, but, and this is very important from a residential point of view, very quiet.
Yeah.
Once you turn off Thap Raya Road and off Thap Raya Road and Pratamnak Road, it's very quiet in there. So even though it's very close to the action and very, very easy to get pretty much anywhere, it's very quiet, and that obviously appeals to a lot of people. The first property is in Pattaya Heights, which is located just off Pratamnak Road there as you go up the hill. It's a 50 square metre, one bed, one bath condo, available for purchase in a foreign name. It's fully furnished, brand new, and to a very, very high standard. Looks really good. A small European-style kitchen. The building is, I guess it was completed probably a year or 18 months ago, so it's very
Just
new.
a completed property.
Yeah, absolutely. Ready to move in. On the roof, very, very nice swimming pool. Lovely views over Pattaya Bay. Really, really very attractive. There's a gym in there. I think there's a little restaurant in there. So really good amenities. A very nice boutique building, and it's available for only 2 million baht, which obviously works out at pretty much 40,000 baht per square metre, which for that location
is a good price.
It's a very good price.
Even I know that.
Yeah, particularly bearing in mind it's a foreign quota. You often get the more affordable units in Thai quota, because sometimes for some developers those are harder to shift, and so they create demand by pricing them at a significantly lower price than the foreign quota units. Now, the fact that this is foreign quota, 40,000 baht per square metre, full furniture package. I think you've got flat screen TV in there, and you know it's really very nice. Yeah, absolutely. It's a lovely property and great value. So, you know, if you're looking for somewhere either for yourself or a nice rental option, because that location would rent out very, very well.
Yeah, you can imagine that. And also at 50 square metres, you can live in there quite happily for a long time.
Oh, absolutely. You know? I mean, the other thing to bear in mind, of course, is you're talking about 2 million baht, but the furniture package is in there. So there's no significant extra costs to move in or to start having tenants in there. For a 50 square metre, 1 bedroom, brand new apartment in that location, you should be able to get 25,000 baht per month without too much difficulty. Now that works out at 300,000
a year,
and that's a 15% return on the purchase price. It's good business.
Easy. Now you've got the second unit is in the Hyde Park development next door to this Pattaya Heights one.
Yes, indeed. Finished just a little bit before Pattaya Heights, but is still a very new building. Again, similar amenities in terms of the rooftop pool, very nicely done, boutique condo, but all the benefits that we talked about with Pattaya Heights are equally attributable to Hyde Park. This is a 94 square metre, 2-bedroom unit, so very, very good size, 2 beds, 2 baths. It can only be bought in Thai name or company name, this one.
Right, okay.
And as I said a minute ago, what you tend to find is that works out a bit cheaper. It's on the 3rd floor, but the price is only 2.99 million baht. Now, that works out at just a little bit over 30,000 baht per square metre for a very nice unit, very nice new building, great location. Again, it's great value for money. And again, if you look at the rental return, 2 bedrooms, 94 square metres, you should be able to get best part of 30,000 baht per month. Obviously, that 360,000 a year, and on a price of 2.99 million. You know, again, a really good
13% there.
Excellent business. It really is.
Wow. That does sound quite good, actually. Right, okay. What else have we got going on? How's what would you say you're going to be doing the next week or so?
More of the same, I'm afraid. For me personally, the end of the month gets very busy. We've got to get our e-newsletter out, which always takes a bit of work to put together, but nevertheless tends to result in some very positive responses, a lot of inquiries. Coming up to the deadline for adverts and articles for local magazines, which again tends to keep us busy. And generally, just dealing with those inquiries that come in. So it will be, I think it will be a busy next week or so. Obviously interested to see whether the level of inquiries that we've been receiving over the last 7 days or so will continue over the next few weeks. Obviously waiting to see if and when the rainy season starts, how significant that will be after the downpours that we've already had, and obviously what effect that will have on the market. I'm not sure whether or not it was the rain that caused last week to be a little bit quiet, but it's possible. You know,
I'd have just stayed at home. I think a few bars got affected over the weekend. Put it that way.
I'm sure that's right. I mean, as we discussed last week, you know, the big hit was the Jesters Fair. Personally, I was very much looking forward to getting up with my lad and driving down, and you know, it's a very, very nice day there each year. And the fact that, fortunately, my girlfriend had been watching Thai TV and told me that the water on Sukhumvit Road was waist deep, so I didn't even try the journey. I know a few other people who did, and they didn't seem to get where they were going, and they didn't get home until late Sunday night.
Yeah, so I know a lot of people got caught out that way as well. Are you going to go to the gala dinner? We've got the gala dinner. The Jesters Gala Dinner, that's taking place on Saturday the 24th at the Amari Orchard. That'll be good fun.
Yes, I'm not sure. The cricket club have got a table, I think, and if I can find someone to take care of my lad, I may do.
All right then, buddy. Right then, if you want to contact Tim about anything on the show or anything else, actually, just give him a call at Solomons on 038 252 588, or you can email, nice and easy, Pattaya at solmansthailand.com. Solmans, that's S-O-L-M-A-N-N?
S-A-L.
S-A-L-M-A...
Sorry, S-A-L-L-M-A-N-N-S.
There you go,
Thailand.com.
And your website address?
www.solmansthailand.com.
Thanks for that, Tim. Right, that was the property update from Mix 88.5 FM here on PMTV. You can join us live every Wednesday on 88.5 FM at about 20 past noon. So I want to say thank you again to Tim Gladwin from Salmons, and thank you to you for tuning in. So everybody, take care and have a good time. Bye-bye.
Houses, condos or land? Buy, rent or sell? Should we invest now or in the future? The Mix 88.5 Property Update.